Welcome to the Cathedral's podcast, Crossroads. We explore the intersection of faith and the world in thought-provoking bi-monthly episodes featuring guests from around the world who are seeking to live faithfully in the public square. This is a safe space for tough questions around faith, politics, science, technology, and our responsibilities as citizens. Please join us as we search for a better way forward. Welcome to Crossroads. Today we are honored to welcome Dr. Jane Goodall. Dr. Jane was known around the world for her decades-long study of wild chimpanzees in Tanzania. She later on expanded her focus and became a global advocate for human rights, animal welfare, species protection, and many other crucial issues. Jane was passionate about empowering young people to become involved in conservation and humanitarian projects, and she led many educational initiatives focused on both wild and captive chimpanzees. We were fortunate enough to have this conversation with Dr. Goodall less than 2 weeks before her death. She will be missed, but we are honored to be able to have this conversation with her. Dr. Goodall, thank you for joining us this afternoon in our conversation. We're so glad to welcome you by extension to the Cathedral.
Well, thank you so much for the invitation.
Well, let me jump right in and ask you to begin with a spiritual question that I think ties into the work that you're doing around hope. So many people know you as a scientist, as an environmental activist, and as a global voice for hope. How do you think about spirituality or faith in your own life? What context? How does that manifest itself for you?
Well, I think, both when I was growing up in a family, my grandfather was a congregational minister, and we went to church quite often and said our prayers and did all those things. And I went through a time when faith was a very, very real part of my life. And then, I got involved in my work in London before I went to Africa. But when I was out in the forest, that's when I found a real strong connection, spiritual connection to the natural world, to that great spiritual being in which I believed so powerfully, and without which I don't know that I could carry on as I am.
God is this ground of being, this mystery, this great mystery that holds all things together. And I can only imagine how powerful that must have been during the work that you've been doing for so many years. Were there moments in your childhood when you were growing up that first stirred you to a sense of the sacred?
I think, yes. The church where we went in Bournemouth was known as the Cathedral of Congregationalism, and that's where his last preaching was. But then we got a Welsh parson who had this wonderful Welsh voice, and his sermons were absolutely fabulous. And it was really him who brought me into this phase where the whole thing was so real to me. And I had a very vivid dream about that time. I was, I suppose, 18, but I remember it as if it was yesterday. And I don't know how old I was in the dream, but I was pushing through a shouting, sweating, angry crowd. And they were shouting horrible things I couldn't understand. It was another language. And I pushed through, and there was this cross, big, with Jesus on it. And I got quite close, and he looked directly into my eyes and said something. I don't remember what he said, but it was as though that dream, if it was a dream, has enabled me to do what I'm doing now. It's like answering some plea. I don't know.
That's such a powerful vision. Thank you for sharing that. I was about to ask you, my next question was going to be, in the context of what I do as a member of the clergy, I think about the work that you do as a calling. I mean, it's been a life's calling for you, and it's a ministry. I see it as a ministry. It's because it's such a gift and a way of honoring God. Do you see the work that you've been doing as a calling, and do you think it's fair to call it a ministry, or am I using too much religious language?
Well, I call it a mission. And I met a very extraordinary young man who was sent off at 14 to give a message for his people in Papua New Guinea. And he was now a wanted man. And I met him, and he said, I'm a messenger. I'm a messenger for the nature of my country. And he said, he looked at me, looked into my eyes, and he said, you do know you're a messenger too, don't you?
Mhm.
I feel I've got a mission, so I can't stop.
And even at 90, that mission is as powerful for you today as it was many years ago.
Well, I think even more. And by the way, I'm 91.
Oh, forgive me.
And the closer you get to the end, whatever the end is, the faster you have to go because you've got less time to spread a message, which I wouldn't bother if it wasn't working, but the message works. And people who'd given up come up to me and say, I'd given up, but I promise now I'll do my bit.
You're right. The older we get, the more important it becomes to do the things that we believe in the most and think are most important. One of the quotes that I've read that you said was, hope is a verb with its sleeves rolled up. And I know that hope has become a signature theme in your work these days. Talk about a little bit about that and what it means to you, and because it's so very important in the world in which we live these days.
Yeah, well, we are indeed going through very, very dark times, politically, socially, and of course, environmentally. And I see humanity. It's as though we're at the mouth of a very, very long, dark tunnel. And right at the end, there's a little star shining. That's hope. But it's no good sitting at the mouth of the tunnel with our arms folded, hoping for that star to come close. We've got to roll up our sleeves, climb over, crawl under, work around all the obstacles that lie between us and the star. And that includes pollution of air, water, and land. It includes climate change. It includes loss of biodiversity. We must alleviate poverty. We must reduce unsustainable lifestyles. We must absolutely stop the cruel, polluting, and shocking factory farms for animals and industrial agriculture that's killing our soil as well as losing biodiversity. And, all of these different obstacles. And the good news, there's a group of people or several groups tackling every single one of the problems that I mentioned and that I haven't. But sadly, they're so often working in silos and they solve their problem. But that, if they haven't been thinking holistically, can lead to another problem, like closing a coal mine, stopping CO2 going to the greenhouse gases, at the same time, thousands of people losing their jobs. If they thought holistically, there are at least some organizations that train people whose industry collapses into a new way of making a living.
To move beyond the either or approach to things and to be more holistic. Absolutely. With such a list of issues that we face, how do you keep your hope going? How do you keep your sight on that star?
Because I'm an obstinate kind of person. And the more I seem to be hit on all sides by the problems that obviously I personally can't solve the genocide in Gaza. I wish I could, but I can't. I can talk about it. I can talk about the horror of the suffering, but it all makes me even more determined not to give up. And maybe it was helpful that I lived through World War II because there were about 6 months when Britain was doomed. The rest of Europe was defeated, or like France, capitulated. We had Chamberlain who wanted to capitulate like France and work with Hitler. But fortunately, I was on the South Coast, and our protection from Nazi Germany, the might of their navy and air force, was a little line of scaffolding along the coast with some barbed wire. I mean, that we weren't ready, but we had Churchill raising the spirit of the British people. so that old men came out willing to fight the Germans with their pitchforks. And Churchill saying, we'll fight them on the beaches and the streets. And he was heard by someone to turn aside to a friend and say, and we'll fight them with the ends of broken bottles, because that's all we bloody well got. So, then there was the Blitz in London, and the people, they never gave up. Their spirit was maintained. But without Churchill, we would have succumbed, no question. And so we were in a hopeless situation, but somehow we came through. And I think that has helped somehow.
I agree. The Battle of Britain itself is a period of history that I find absolutely fascinating. My father was a veteran of the Second World War, and so I found for most of my life quite drawn to understand that conflict. But I fear that now, unlike then, we don't have a Churchill.
That's sadness. We have the opposite.
We don't quite have the leadership that we need, I would say. And I think that it behooves all of us in our own small ways, and my small way as dean of this cathedral and others in their ways, to lead where we can and point in that direction of hope that you keep talking about, and hard work. Absolutely.
Hard work and, resilience in a way. I mean, you get knocked down, but like those little dolls, you pop up again.
Yeah, right. Yes. It's important to get up again. That's the truth. So, in that sort of vein, what would you suggest that faith communities like the cathedral or the congregational church in which you attended, what should we be doing? What can faith communities do during this moment of holding on to hope and hard work?
Well, I don't know. One thing that's really important, and I've noticed it everywhere, we have a seemingly unsolvable problem. We have the desire for all people to have a good standard of living, and we seem to believe there can be unlimited economic development along the lines that we're pursuing it now on a planet with finite natural resources and growing populations of humans and livestock. And it doesn't add up. So, I'm not answering your question there, but I'm just stating that's something I can't solve, and I don't know who can. But because of this concern about war that's going on and the unrest and the standard of living, so that more and more people are falling into poverty and homelessness, the environment tends to get pushed aside. And yet we're part of the natural world and we depend on it for food, water, air, everything. So during these hard times, it becomes really important to continue to protect the environment for the future. Otherwise, what is the future for our children and great grandchildren if we just go on destroying the ecosystems the way we are? We've got to stop doing that.
It's one of the things that I think has been so detrimental to all of us in this modern world in which we live has been this false bifurcation between humanity and God's creation, as if we are over here and creation is over there, and we only have to deal with it when we want to deal with it. Otherwise, we can somehow fool ourselves into thinking that in our concrete cities that we can do quite fine without it, which is, a complete delusion, it seems to me.
And, religion too, with the mistranslation of the Bible where it says man was given dominion over the birds and the fishes, etc. And the actual Hebrew word, I'm told, is more like stewardship.
Yes, absolutely. We are given the call to be stewards of the gifts that God has given us, not simply to control them or to dominate them. And you're right, for many, many centuries, those words were misunderstood. And I'm very proud of the church because for the past decade or so, or 2 decades, we've been much better about clarifying that. We still have a lot of work to do, but it's a good step forward because the story of creation in Genesis, when you understand that word as steward, it makes a very powerful story about what our job is as God's stewards on earth.
Yep. And also, it was so amazing that the animal I was given to study by Louis Leakey was our closest living relative, the chimpanzee. And when I went to study the chimps, I hadn't been to college. We couldn't afford it. And yet Leakey, after 2 years, said, Jane, you've got to get a degree. I got you a place to do a PhD. We don't have time for an undergraduate degree. And imagine how I felt when I got there and these wise professors told me I'd done everything wrong. Jane, you shouldn't have given the chimpanzees numbers. I mean, names, they should have numbers. You can't talk about them having personalities or minds capable of solving problems. You certainly can't talk about them having emotions. But because their biology is so like ours, and we share 98.7% of our DNA with them, etc., etc., and because their behavior is so like ours, kissing, embracing, doing things the way we do in the same context, science gradually, they never said they were wrong, but they gradually changed. And that opened the door for all the other animals. So today we know that rats and octopuses can be incredibly intelligent and they can have empathy and they can dream and all these things.
And create communities.
Yes, absolutely.
I've once heard a quote that you said. I saw an interview many years ago, I believe it was, when you said that, quite frankly, you would have gone out and studied anything. If they just given you a mouse to study, you would have studied the mouse, that it was being out in nature that was such a pull for you.
Yeah, it was being out in Africa. Africa held me in its spell ever since reading Tarzan.
Africa changes you. It certainly did me during my visits there. It's what a powerful, powerful place. So at 91, you've invited people worldwide to mark the milestone with concrete action. What surprised you the most about how communities chose to celebrate when you turned 90?
Well, I don't know that anything surprised me, but I know that for the whole year, they wanted to celebrate my birthday. There were so many birthday cakes and so many candles to blow out. But there was one thing out of the whole year that I will never forget. The highlight of my birthday year was in Carmel, in California, on a dog-friendly beach. I was introduced to 90 dogs.
At once?
And all at the same time. It's a wonderful photo.
I would love to see that. I'm going to go Google that, see if I can find it. You've been on an active speaking tour across North America. And when you step off stage and meet people afterward, what are they asking you that they weren't asking you 5 or 10 years ago?
Well, I think I get asked more and more often, how do I maintain hope when I've seen so much, harm? I think I get asked that almost all the time. Other things, I suppose because I'm older, I'm asked what I think is going to happen when I die. Don't get asked that very often, but I do get asked it sometimes.
Well, let this clergyman ask you that question. What do you think happens to you when you die?
Well, from certain things that have happened to me, and I think I've read every single book about near-death experiences, and I feel absolutely sure myself that at the end, it's not the end. What comes beyond? I don't know, but something. And I think it will be a great adventure to find out what that something is.
I agree with you so much. And I often love the analogy that I've read some time ago that says that the world after this one, the life after this one, is as different and as unimaginable as a baby trying to imagine what it's like outside of the womb.
Yeah, probably.
And that those two forms of existence are just so radically different that you could never describe it to an infant in the womb, what it would be like to be born into this world. And in a similar way, where we go from now is as marvelously different as that. And I love that. I hold on to that.
Yeah, it's like a caterpillar turning into a butterfly.
Absolutely. And, speaking of 90 dogs, I haven't had 90 dogs, but I've had a bunch of them. And quite frankly, I'm looking forward to seeing all them as much as I am the people that I have loved and lost.
Oh, me too. And some of the chimps too, David Gravy at No Flow, and definitely the dogs, for sure.
So conservation has increasingly centered around justice and land rights and livelihoods and indigenous leadership. What is one concrete policy change you'd urge lawmakers to make that you think would be extremely helpful right now?
Well, I don't know about lawmakers, but one thing I think is really, really important for anyone interested in conserving the natural world is the importance of working with local communities. And we, the Jane Goodall Institute, it all came to a head for me when I was flying over the tiny Gombe National Park where I studied the chimps, and we still have a team there. We just had our 65th anniversary, which is pretty amazing.
That
But
is amazing.
yeah, in 1960, when I began, Gombe was part of the Great Equatorial Forest Belt across Africa. By the mid 1980s, I looked down from a small plane and saw with horror Gombe was just a little island of forest, and all around the hills were bare. And it hit me. The people are cutting down their trees because they're struggling to survive. They're living in poverty and they want some money from charcoal or timber or to clear land to grow more food. And what hit me was we have to help these people find ways of making a living without destroying the environment, or else we can't save chimps, forests, or anything else. And so we began what I think was the very, very first true community-led conservation program, where it wasn't a bunch of arrogant white people going into a poor village, and there are 12 around the Gombe National Park, but 7 locally picked Tanzanians who went in, sat down, and said to the people, "What can JGI do to make your lives better?" And we began there. And what they wanted, more food, so restore fertility without pesticides and herbicides. They wanted better health and education, work with the local Tanzanian authorities to get them to do more, raise money for scholarships to give girls a chance for secondary education. Then we could bring in microfinance, which has worked brilliantly. Mohammed Yunus introduced me to women in Bangladesh who had held money in their hand for the first time. And when they told me about it, they all cried. They said what it was like before we had this tiny loan. So then bringing in some modern technology. And that program, Take Care or Takari, has been so successful. It's in all the villages through Chimp Range in Tanzania, helping all the villagers, and in 6 other African countries where JGI studies and conserves chimps and their habitat. So working with the local people, now they understand that saving the environment isn't just for wildlife. And that's been the mistake of conservation, to tell people you've got to save the environment because these animals are important. They now know it's just as important for their own future as for wildlife.
It's fascinating. I have spent some time in southern Sudan doing mission work, building schools and hospitals. And you mentioned microfinancing. It has seen amazing results there as well. I really think it's a matter of empowering women, is what it is.
Yep.
And you give a mother, a wife, a homemaker, these women who maintained these villages and communities, and you give them a little bit of money, and they just do amazing things with it. Yes, I'm so glad it's been successful.
Very, very successful. And then, of course, we introduce to all these villagers our youth program, Roots and Shoots.
Yes. Talk more about Roots and Shoots. Tell people about that program.
Okay, well, in the mid 80s, when I was traveling all over the world, talking about the conditions in Africa and learning at the same time what we're doing in the other part of the world to harm the environment. And I was meeting young people, high school, university, even back then, who were losing hope. And some of them were angry, some of them were deeply depressed, some of them just were apathetic. Most of them actually just didn't seem to care. So I began asking them, why do you feel like this? And they all said more or less the same, because you've ruined our future and there's nothing we can do about it. Well, we've probably been actually stealing the future of the next generations ever since the Industrial Revolution. Maybe the Agricultural Revolution, I don't know. So 12 high school students came to my house in Tanzania, and they were worried about different things. Some of them, why is the government doing anything about poaching in the national parks or about the illegal dynamite fishing? Of course, the answer was corruption. Some of them were worried about street children with no homes. Some of them were worried about the cruel treatment of stray dogs or other animals. And they wanted me to fix them. So I said, well, get your friends together who feel like you do. So we had a meeting of about 30 high school students from 8 different schools, and Roots and Shoots was born with the main message: every one of us, all over the planet, every single person makes some impact every day. And we can choose. Very tiny children can't choose, and people with no money, but most of us can choose the kind of difference we make. And because I learned in nature the interconnection, interdependence of everything, we decided each group would choose 3 projects: one to help people, one to help other animals, one to help the environment. And what started with those 12 high school students is now in 76 countries and growing. And we have members from kindergarten all the way through university, and many adults forming groups. And, the latest group formed was in Ukraine. The one before that was Mongolia. We're trying to see if we can get a group in Palestine because they need hope so much.
They certainly do. In an age where science often claims to explain everything, and it does in certain ways, talk about, I think, mystery and a sense of mystery is so important to really understand the essence of life and the gift of what's around us. What role should mystery play in education, in helping people to understand the not only the challenges we have in front of us, but the opportunities we have in front of us?
Well, I personally think without mystery, without that feeling of, there's always something else, life would be boring for me. I love the feeling of mystery. And it's fine to say the universe began with the Big Bang. I'm sure it did. But what led to the Big Bang? I mean, and you can't go back and back and back without this great mystery. And I know when I was a child, I used to spend hours thinking, well, time. There must have been a beginning of time, but there can't have been a beginning of time. And space, there must be an ending, but there can't be an ending. And it really bothered me.
It's one of those fascinating questions, isn't it? And I have loved the direction, some of the ways that quantum mechanics and other more modern physics have sort of bumped up against spirituality a little bit almost. And I find that fascinating.
Some of the greatest scientists have said there is intelligence behind the universe. Albert Einstein, for one.
Francis Collins, who's a friend of this cathedral, who was on the Genome Project for so long, he's a man of deep faith who would make that same argument.
Yep, he's a great, great friend of mine. Every time I'm in DC, I have dinner with him.
He's an amazing man. I have deep admiration for him.
Me too.
Speaking of admiration, what should, from all your time with the chimpanzees and in their families and in their communities, what should we learn from them? What should we know as human beings or as Americans that we might have forgotten that you found so helpful or good about those sorts of communities?
Well, when it comes to their behavior, They're very good at reconciliation. They don't like to be in a situation where there's tension. And the females are particularly good at reducing tension and reconciliation when the two males are being fighting, you know. The importance of the for the child of mothers, that really, really made a deep impact because now we've been working for 65 years. We can look back over the lives, and what I said from the beginning is true, that if you have a supportive mother, then you grow up to be a better mother yourself. And if you're a male, you reach a higher position in the hierarchy. And my mother was one of those supportive mothers. And, you know, I think it's terribly important for a child of up to 2 or 3 to have, it doesn't have to be a biological mother, but 2 or 3 people around the child can rely on, who's always there and who will support them. And I was in a family, and the little boy of 4, I think he was 4, he was all excited because he got a new thing. He was going to grow up and be an engine driver. But his father was a doctor, and he immediately crushed that child and said, "No, you won't be an engine driver. Your sort of person doesn't become an engine driver. You're going to be a doctor or a lawyer. Stop thinking about it." And I'm thinking, support the child. Say, "Wow, you're going to be an amazing engine driver." Don't crush them like that. It's terrible.
It is terrible. And I was blessed as well with a supportive mother who allowed me to dream, and it makes all the difference.
It does. I mean, when I was 10 and dreamed of going to Africa and living with wild animals and writing books about them, everybody laughed at me. How will you get there? You don't have money, which was true. Africa's far away. We didn't know much about it. It's really dangerous. And you're just a girl. It's 80 years ago. Mum said, if you really want to do this, you're going to have to work really hard, take advantage of every opportunity. And if you don't give up, I'm sure you'll find a way. And I take that message around the world to particularly disadvantaged communities. And I wish Mum was alive, and maybe she knows how many people have come and said, Jane, I want to thank you. You taught me because you did it. I can do it too.
Oh, that's such a wonderful way to sort of wrap up our conversation. I want to ask you one last question, if you might, on the theme of hope and the work that you have done. As you look ahead, what do you hope your legacy will be? And not only your legacy as a pioneer in conservation, but also as a person, your spiritual legacy. Talk a little bit about what that hope is.
Well, I think my hope is that our Roots and Shoots program, collaborating with other similar organizations, will have spread everywhere. And, you know, I keep thinking the other day, some big organization, I can't remember what it was, but they were asked, what do you feel about, what do you say? What are you trying to do? What could you do about all the children killed in Gaza? And there was silence. And somebody said, well, supposing those were Roots and Shoots children, because one of the things, this is slightly going astray, but we try and bring young people from different countries together. And they're beginning to understand much more important than the color of your skin or your culture, your language, even your religion. It's the fact we're all human beings. We all laugh, we all cry, we can all love. What we have to do with our superior intellect is to counteract that tendency we have for being aggressive and hateful. So what do I hope my legacy will be? A more peaceful world, a world where we learn to live in some kind of harmony with nature and the other animals with whom we are on this planet and with whom we should share the planet, but from whom we are stealing the planet, and from our children. So I just hope that through Roots and Shoots, which has values of compassion and respect for all living things, I hope that will spread, and also compassion and respect for other animals.
Well, that will be my prayer as well. And I'm so grateful for the time that you've given us this afternoon. And just know how much we are supporting you and the work that you've been doing, and grateful for that work. And the bottom line is, as you've said, we're all in this together and we need each other.
We can't do it alone.
Thank you, Dr. Goodall. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Well, thank you very much. And I've enjoyed our conversation.
I have as well. God bless. For our next episode, join us for highlights from an in-person conversation with the Right Reverend C. Andrew Doyle, Bishop of Texas, about the challenges of modern-day faith. Through the lens of Bishop Doyle's latest book, we will discuss the onslaught of social media and the forces that challenge our spiritual lives, and how we can respond with courage, clarity, and conviction. Thank you for listening to Crossroads, and until next time, many blessings. If the digital offerings of the Cathedral enrich your daily life, please consider becoming a supporter today by making a gift at cathedral.org/inspire.